Welcome to today's Global Connections program. I'm Bill Miller. What can the private sector do to reduce poverty and help to empower women? What is one business development expert doing to focus attention on this particular issue? We'll be back in just a moment to talk about these and other important issues. Welcome back to our program. Today we're focusing attention on what the role of the private sector can be in helping to create economic prosperity and to do other things such as combating poverty as well as to help empower women. My guest is a business development expert who's written extensively on in this particular area. My guest today is Mona Pearl, who is a global strategic business development expert as well as the founder and COO of Beyond a Strategy, Inc. Some of Ms. Pearl's past corporate clients include Deutsche Telekom, Michelin, American Airlines, Philip Morris, and Bacardi. Ms. Pearl is the author of a book, Grow Globally, Opportunities for Your Middle Market Company Around the World, and she's been quoted as an expert by CNBC, Oracle, Chicago Tribune, National Public Radio, and many others. Mona Pearl, welcome to today's Global Connections program.
I'm delighted to be here.
I appreciate you being with me today. You've got a very extensive resume here. We can spend the whole program talking about what you've accomplished. Let's start off with your book. That is the big ticket item right now, and this is a copy of it, Grow Globally. I want to make sure I get it right. Opportunities for Your Middle Market Company Around the World. Tell us a little bit about this book. Why did you decide to write it, and what are some of the main themes? We'll get into them in greater detail.
Sure. The book was inspired by my experience, personal experience around the world, talking to companies and always being asked the same questions, same issues. No matter what industry, no matter what country around the world, it didn't even matter the size of the company. And therefore I decided to write a book that's hands-on experience, that's practical, real-world strategies, tactics and advice to help companies, to help the management, to help the board of directors make the right decisions. And decisions that are sustainable, decisions that are practical and can lead to success because of the huge percentage of failure around the world.
What do you think, what are some of the factors that could help lead to success, and what are some of the reasons for failure? I guess there are many reasons for failure. We could spend 2 or 3 days talking about them, but what are some of the factors for success? And then we'll talk about a few of the pitfalls along the way.
Sure. Like in everything in life, there is no one reason for success, and there is no one only reason for failure. So as far as success, especially in international business, companies, actually people that run these companies, need to be very, very sensitive to cultural differences. We may look the same, we use the iPhones and the computers, we dress alike, but we are not. We are programmed in a different way. So it's really a matter of the mindset, how people think, their values, their norms, how they are programmed to look at the world and to understand the world.
Mm-hmm. And when you were talking about that, it brought back some of the examples from years ago. I think Chevrolet had the Nova, which was very popular in the English-speaking countries, but in Spanish it's Nova, which means it doesn't go, which is certainly a cultural challenge if you're trying to sell a car that's not going to go. And they had another, Pepsi had a saying that fell pretty flat in China, as I recall. It brought your ancestors back from the dead is a literal translation. Are companies getting more attuned to this cultural sensitivity on really learning your market, focusing on the people understanding the values of that society before moving in or trying to develop economic enterprises there?
I would have hoped so, and especially companies with a lot of resources, that there's really no reason for them not to do that. But reality is different. Reality is different that when a company goes to China and wants to sell cheese, and doesn't even realize that the Chinese do not eat cheese. And when a company goes to India and they want to sell cereal in a box and they don't understand that that's not within the culture. So it's really one of these things of a certain mindset of doing your homework, of being humble, of actually not assuming anything that just because we like it here or in a different country, it's going to work everywhere. It's a whole different world, and even within a country. I mean, to illustrate it better, let's take the U.S. I'm from Chicago. Chicago is not the same as New York, and it's not the same as California. Why would we assume that every city, even within a country, is the same? Not to mention, when we look at a certain area like Latin America, why would we assume that all countries there are the same? They don't even speak the same language. Latin America, South America has Portuguese, Spanish, French, a few other dialects. I mean, how do we even dare assume that? And it has to do with you don't know what you don't know.
That's right.
And therefore you don't know what to ask and what to look into. And this is why there are people that can help companies at least start asking the right questions.
And this is very critical to do this, and that's one of the reasons that you wrote this book, and that's covered in here. Now, I'm sure many of our viewers would like more information. They can go to www.monapearl.com, one word, monapearl.com.
Correct.
And then they can also go to beyondastrategy.com to get additional information and talk about, focus in on some of the other items that we're talking about today. So it's very important. Now, let me ask you, we're talking about companies in general, and the idea behind it is that the private sector has a role to play in helping to create this better world. It helps them, but it also helps the society. It helps the culture. It creates employment opportunities. Do we see that companies today are developing more of a corporate responsibility, or they're sort of viewing things differently today than they did maybe 15, 20, 30 years ago? They feel like they're members of a community and that they do have a corporate responsibility to help contribute to not only to their bottom line of making money, but also to helping that community and to deal with some of the problems I talked about in the opening, such as reducing poverty or perhaps combating climate change and that type of thing. Is there more of a mindset in that direction today?
I would say that there is more talk about it. I hear it way more. And the strategies, for example, that I help companies develop, it's an integral part of it. You have to work the social sustainability, there's some kind of accountability and giving back to the community. Now, corporations do talk about it. Some are doing a wonderful job. Companies like Coca-Cola, like Pepsi, like IKEA, quite a few other companies are doing a great job. But here we're talking again about the giants. And it's pretty difficult for the middle market company to come up with the resources and be able to do that. Now, that said, there is somewhat of a new trend that developed, and that has to do with social entrepreneurship. That kind of takes the place of a lot of these things that should be done under corporate responsibility and work it into the business world. So, my personal opinion is that companies should really get together with these social entrepreneurs, and really by understanding the culture, where they're going to do business, they can really develop a wonderful plan that will make them feel good, not only look good. Looking good, I know it's great, shareholder meetings and all of that, but feel good, do good, and again, the famous saying, do well by doing good.
And it works both ways, yes.
Sure.
It certainly does. Now, the United Nations has been very involved in developing partnerships. I think everybody's come to the conclusion you can't deal with these problems in isolation. No one country can defeat them, no one group, no one region, but everybody has to work together against climate change or creating employment opportunities, that type of thing. And the UN has certainly reached out to the private sector through their Office of Partnerships, through the Global Compact that the UN has, and what have you. Are more and more businesses, I know the Global Compact, as I recall the last time I heard, they had like over 7,000 or maybe more now businesses from around the world that were part of it, and we're focusing on these issues, on sustainable development, on human rights, on a variety of things. Again, this is linked into this new mindset. Are more and more companies thinking about that, maybe team working with the United Nations, a UN agency, or some other group, perhaps a non-governmental organization or a group like that?
Yes, and it's very important for companies to realize that. But I don't want to be pessimistic, but it is going to work only when all sides see the benefit. And that famous saying, "What's in it for me?" Both sides or all sides have to gain something out of it. So collaboration is the only way to solve these world problems. First of all, it's an interconnected economy. Today, with the internet and transportation, we cannot just focus on one area of the world, on one country. It's global. And part of globalization is also taking the responsibility of not only selling your product and your service around the world, but also doing something to make the lives of people better. And not to mention, when you look at the added benefit, when the people are happy, they do a better job. When people are well fed and they have the energy and the environment is clean and they can raise their kids, they will be more than happy to contribute. And this is how you create the citizenship. This is how you create good consumers, and everybody wins.
Now, women are pivotal. They are pivotal to every family, community, country, the whole world, to be quite honest, and to every society. The United Nations in 2000 developed the United Nations Millennium Development Goals, 8 logical, practical goals to reduce poverty by 50%, to promote sustainable development, but one was to empower women. And women, we see more and more coming online as entrepreneurs. They're developing their own businesses. They are helping to create this better economy and this better world in their own communities. What recommendations would you make to women to help them launch their enterprises? I know it's a little different from a developed country maybe to a developing country, but are there some basic principles that women need to consider as they move into a business endeavor?
Definitely. And being a woman and a second-generation entrepreneur, there are basic thoughts that starts with us as women. First of all, we need to believe in ourselves. We need to want to do something and move forward. And as everybody well knows, women are raised different. We are raised to take care of everybody. We feel guilty if we don't do that. So it's one of these things, the understanding that there is a price. There is a cost that comes with it. The other one is really not feeling bad. It's finding the balance. And a balance is not 50-50. The balance is very individual. It could be 80% and 20%. Then the woman can decide whether the 80 is work or it's basically family life. But women need to believe in themselves. The other one, women need to know how to help each other and elevate each other and push each other not out of the way, but up. And this is something that many women don't really know how. Every year I try to mentor 2 or 3 women, young women from around the world, and it makes the whole difference. And the idea is that these women, it's teaching them how to believe in themselves, the fact that they need to acquire the skills, the fact that they should remain women. They do not have to become men, like men, in order to be competitive in the environment. Women have different skills, maybe a more panoramic view of the world, maybe more of a multitasker. It's definitely something that women and men can work together in concert. So in general, the way we look at it, it starts with us women. It also starts with us knowing what we want, and therefore people will help us. There are a lot of people around the world that believe in women, and it's a natural progression.
Well, you're watching Global Connections Television, which is an independently produced program. The expressions on Global Connection are solely those of the moderator and his guest. We'll be back in just a moment after this important message.
My name is Michael Douglas. As the United Nations messenger of peace, I look forward to the day when all of us who inhabit this fragile planet are free from the threat of nuclear weapons. That's why I'm calling on all young artists to use their creative talents to imagine what that world would be like, a world free of nuclear weapons. The United Nations and the Harmony for Peace Foundation have jointly launched the 2012 Art for Peace contest. This contest is open to children and teens across the globe. Wherever you live, we want to hear from you. Whether you paint or draw, use watercolors or acrylics, pencils or crayons, the Art for Peace contest wants you to use your imagination to express your vision for a world free of nuclear weapons. Art is the universal language. Art speaks to our hearts and minds. Art can make a difference, and so can you. Thank you.
Welcome back to our program. Today we're looking at the role of the private sector in helping to create employment opportunities and also to combat many of the problems that affect us around the world, such as poverty, or perhaps it's climate change, or empowering women. So the private sector has a tremendous role to play, and my guest is someone who has written extensively on this particular issue. My guest today is Mona Pearl. Ms. Pearl is a global strategic business development expert, as well as the founder and COO of Beyond the Strategy, Inc. Some of Ms. Pearl's past corporate clients include Deutsche Telekom, Michelin, American Airlines, Philip Morris, and Bacardi. Ms. Pearl is the author of a book, Grow Globally, Opportunities for Your Middle Market Company Around the World. Mona, we're talking about your book, and it's a very interesting book, and I'll show it again, but it is so important that we try to give people the tools to help create economic opportunities and to deal with many of these problems that we've been talking about during the course of the program. And I was just curious with your book, are there specific, we were talking about the UN Millennium Development Goals and the corporate responsibility, and then we transferred that, carried it one step further and talked about networking, partnerships with United Nations agencies, with other groups, perhaps faith-based groups or whatever it might be, a non-governmental organization. But do you see this developing even further, that the businesses want to reach out and to look at new opportunities to do even smarter things, like we hear this title, smart philanthropy. It's used in the humanitarian agencies. It's used with the philanthropists, the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, Ted Turner, people like that. But are they looking at ways that they can get more involved in communities and in a smarter way than maybe they've done in the past? We can all learn, I guess is what I'm saying. We can learn from the past.
We can always learn and improve, and smart philanthropy is a leading edge vision by Melinda and Bill Gates and a lot of other high net worth individuals that joined them. And this is a great leadership, and other companies should learn from that. And it's beautiful that people like that do lead by example. Now, in many cases, smaller companies, I assume, and also from my experience, would love to be involved, but they don't always know how. Where do you start? I mean, it's nice to talk about philanthropy. Some companies don't really have the funds to do that, especially the last 3 years with the economy. But I really think it's something that companies can actually also contribute by helping clean the environment, healthcare, education. There are so many other ways that smaller companies and middle-size, but definitely follow, because a better world for us, a better world that we leave for the next generation, is something that should make us feel good. We shouldn't just think about the now and the today. We should think about tomorrow, because we owe it to our ancestors. They thought about the tomorrow.
And that concept that you're talking about, the one in particular, sustainable development, this whole sustainable development concept came out of the UN Conference on Environment and Development in 1992, what was called the Earth Summit. It was held in Rio de Janeiro at that time, Rio de Janeiro in Brazil. And of course, that idea has taken hold, and it's been incorporated, I think, a lot into the corporate thinking and individuals too. A lot of folks are thinking about how you can use the resources of the earth today, not destroy them, and leave them for the future to some degree, so that we are good stewards of the planet. and that's very important to do. Earlier I mentioned about the United Nations Millennium Development Goals with the goal, well, goal number 8 was to promote partnerships, cooperative arrangements, and of course businesses fit right into that. You mentioned goal 7 about promoting sustainable development. Empowering women was goal, I think, number 3, if I'm not mistaken. So as we go through these goals to help reduce infant mortality rates, to reduce maternal death rates, to reverse the AIDS pandemic, our businesses have most of them, I know they incorporate a lot of this thinking into their plans, their business plans, and to their philanthropical outreach, but have they heard much about the United Nations Millennium Development Goals as far as these 8 practical, logical goals that were adopted in 2000 over a 15-year period? Do you hear CEOs talking about them very often?
My honest answer would be not really. But in many ways, I'm not surprised because we're talking here about a global initiative. And in many cases, when I talk to U.S. CEOs or management teams, when it comes to the global, to the world outside of the U.S., it's some kind of a mystery to them. So I'm not sure it's something that resonates with them because it will if a company decides to go global, if it decides to develop a strategy and use some of it as part of the strategy. And it's something that will develop with time. Unfortunately, it takes longer than we wish.
Yes, exactly. Now, you mentioned the international financial situation, and of course, we saw in 2007, really 2008, the United States sparked a financial collapse, I know, to some degree in our own country and worldwide. It affected people in many areas of the world. What has been the ramification of this? Have we seen that companies are starting to come out of it now? Has it impacted the philanthropical outreach, their ability to help communities to do the things that we're talking about, to help empower women and what have you?
The economic tsunami, as I call it,
right. Tsunami is a good term, yes.
Is not really over, but I think something good came of it, and that people went back to basics, which really matters. And there are way more companies that are involved in the community that want to do something that's good. Now, I'm not sure it goes on a global level because, again, there is a little bit of a disconnect, but it's definitely something that companies will be looking more and more, and people in general. The whole idea of the global economy, the world is interconnected, definitely something happening in the U.S., it trickles down or up, whichever way, to the rest of the world. And the same thing happens with many other countries. Well, Europe, for example. So one of the things, something good came out of it, and people really start to care. And I hear discussions in corporate boardrooms that I didn't really hear before. People are a little bit more humble, more open to talking about themselves and how they feel and what they believe in addition to the bottom line numbers.
ICT, information, communication, and technology. This is sort of the buzzword. These are the buzzwords of as we move into the 21st century. And we see that the United Nations has been very involved. They've sponsored conferences on high-level meetings on ICT and that type of thing. What if you had, let's talk about if we have a group of women, perhaps in Asia or Africa or wherever it might be, who are looking at starting their own businesses, or Latin America, or even in a developed country too, but we'll focus on the developing countries. What recommendations would you give to them as far as how to tap into the information, communication, and technology, this whole concept of ICT? Using computers and a variety of things, right?
Sure. Yeah, it's, we also have the social media, but one thing that can be used in a different way is the whole idea of education and bringing people together from around the world. I remember about 10, 15 years ago, I worked on a project in healthcare, and that was to give access in developed countries, at that time it was Yemen, to the expertise of the U.S. Same thing can be done here. Women that are successful, that are willing to share the tips for success, the hurdles, what it takes to make it happen, we can share it globally through the communications modes, through a conference, through the satellite, through education. And this is something that's extremely important. But again, talking about success in the U.S. is a whole different story than we talk about in Uganda or South Africa or Portugal or Ireland. I mean, it's different. So even the speakers, even the people that are involved, the successful people, need to know how to balance the cultural sensitivity, the understanding of the other culture. It's easier to say that, okay, you have to go and get an education, but if you live in a village someplace in Africa, that you can't even take a bus, I mean, forget a private car. There are no universities in the area. So a little bit of reality check, and I think it can spread wonderfully worldwide and take advantage, give women, give other people access and transparency.
As we, in our last 45 seconds, let me ask you, what do you see as the major challenge we have as we move further into the 21st century in helping to equip people to be able to launch their own entrepreneurial activities?
It's great to be an entrepreneur and a global entrepreneur. And what people need is the will, they need the resources around them, and they need the support. They need to know how, and they need to know that it's basically if you want something, you go after it, you go for it. And these are, it may sound as common sense here in the US, it's not like that in other countries. It's not a free economy that all you have to do is to want and to go for it and to have the drive and inspiration and inclination. So that's one of the things. The other one is basically being able to connect around the world and get all the information so these people, these entrepreneurs can be successful.
Well, Mona Pearl, I want to thank you so very much for bringing us up to date on your very interesting book, and thank you for a very interesting and informative program.
Thank you.
I'm Bill Miller. Thank you for joining us on today's Global Connections program.